Hello my friends and welcome back to the channel. We've all heard the expression, one is too many and 1,000 never enough. It's certainly applied to my drinking and drug use over the years. I've asked myself a million times, and I'm sure you have, why can't I stop? Why can't I just have one drink or drug? Why can't I enjoy myself socially like anybody else? Why does it always end in carnage and negative consequences? Why am I an addict? In this video, from my own experience, I'm going to attempt to explain why you can't stop, why you're an addict possibly, and why it's really hard to stop drinking and using drugs and get out of addiction, but it's even harder to stay sober. And hopefully this video will help you do that. Before I go into the details of it, please help the channel by subscribing. 75% of people don't subscribe that watch all these videos, and it really will help them reach more people and perhaps help a couple more. And if my videos in any way have helped you over the years and are still helping you, and you want to see the channel continue, I really need your help. Please take a moment to click on the link in the description, have a quick read, and if you can help or support the channel in any way you can, it'll be absolutely amazing. And thanks to those who've done it already. Much love. So yeah, many times I ask the question to myself, and I'm sure you have, like I said, why can't you stop? Why am I an addict? It's the $1,000,000 question, isn't it? And if you had the full answer to that and you could invent a pill that stopped you, then you'd be a multi-millionaire, wouldn't you? But there are ways and there are things you can do, as I've proved to myself, and hopefully will explain to you now, that will help you get out of this vicious cycle that you're in. Because half the issue really is understanding what's happening and why you're doing what you're doing and why it is you can't stop and the reasons that you do drink and the reasons that you do take your drugs. But if you don't address all these things, as painful as they may be sometimes, then you're never going to maintain any sort of long-term sobriety. It's essential. I mean, like I say, it's really tough to get sober. It takes a warrior and someone very strong just to get through that withdrawal and get out the other side. But it takes an even greater strength because you've got to heal those issues that were taking you there. But first of all, some science which is really interesting around addiction. And a lot of this is new research which is proving really interesting around dopamine. And many people will have a misconception around dopamine and what it actually is and what it actually does. And there's a lot of scientific proof now that there are a lot of genetics around addiction. So basically, if you have a relative, whether it be a parent or grandparent or whatever, addiction runs in the family in some way, there's a 40 to 60% chance that you will suffer from it. And that's science. And there are reasons for this. There are a few reasons for this actually, but let's just talk quickly about dopamine first. What it is. Because there's a lot of evidence that addicts, the dopamine system in an addict's brain, or someone who suffers from addiction, doesn't work in quite the same way as someone who doesn't have any issues around addiction. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter. There's not a misconception around it. It's not a pleasure chemical. The pleasure chemicals are really serotonin, oxytocin, endorphins. They're sort of pleasure chemicals. But what dopamine does, it's a neurotransmitter that carries messages and reinforces pleasurable behavior. It helps your brain seek out that pleasure again, if you like. It's responsible for so many important things, particularly your get up and go and your drive, your motivation, your sex drive, energy levels, sleep patterns. There's so many things that dopamine are responsible for. Going back to caveman days when they were hunting prey and they stumbled on a wild animal, they're just about to kill it, if you like. They might have been days looking for it. There'd be a massive release of dopamine because obviously that was the memory of the brain, the reward of food, which they may have been without for ages. You know, that's what it does. It helps you go back to that behavior and seek that behavior out, if you like. It creates pathways in your brain. There's a lot of evidence that suggests that people lacking in dopamine will generally suffer from all sorts of mental health issues, like anxiety and depression, like get up and go, no motivation, feeling that nothing matters. They'll have low libidos, low sex drive. They'll have sleep issues, broken sleep, and all this sort of thing. And also low dopamine, or it can lead to other illnesses such as Parkinson's disease, and also has been linked to ADHD as well. Lots of things, and restless leg syndrome. So it's responsible for a lot, dopamine. What happens to us as addicts, because we have issues around this area in our brain, and there is evidence that we do. And even if we don't, what happens is when we take drugs for the first time, say, or drink alcohol in particular, and particularly drugs such as cocaine and stuff like that, but opiates as well, but alcohol, there's a massive surge of dopamine, that area of the brain that produces it, because what dopamine does is carry messages from the nervous system to from the reward center in the brain, and it reinforces that brain. It carries them to the frontal cortex and everywhere. So basically, there's a massive surge when you take drugs or alcohol. It's an easy way, because we don't have to go hunting food anymore. I mean, normal people, I'll use the word normal people, will get a surge of dopamine from having a nice meal, or doing something they like, or achieving a goal, or getting somewhere and doing something. They'll get the normal surge of dopamine. For an addict, if they take a drug or drink alcohol, there'll be this it'll be like a massive euphoria, because you may have been in such a low state with anxiety, depression, low mood, lack of motivation, for whatever reasons, that all of a sudden you've got this easy way and very quick way of getting this dopamine surge, and that reinforces that behavior. It means that you'll continue to seek out, because there's that massive surge of dopamine, your brain will immediately go for its pleasure, if you like, to the drugs and alcohol, and you want to keep repeating that behavior and repeating it. Unfortunately, it's a vicious circle, because what happens is the brain can't continue to produce dopamine in that quantity every time you take drugs and alcohol. So it has to compensate and rebalance. So what will happen is it'll start to make less dopamine. There'll be less and less binding to receptors, and you'll need more of the drug or more alcohol. This is where tolerance comes in, to achieve anywhere near the same high, which you'll never get as high as the first one. You'll all recognize that feeling. And this causes then obviously physical dependence and true addiction. But the mental addiction, that addiction to that pleasure and seeking that pleasure from dopamine reward, causes the addiction to start with, and you'll continue to seek that, because that's just your brain telling you what to do. You're replacing natural highs from dopamine with this artificial massive surge from drugs and alcohol. You can go to the doctors. There's lots of natural ways to increase your dopamine. You can increase it, this is old-fashioned ways, but they really do work, I promise you. You've got to sort your sleep out. Proper sleep cycle will help dopamine production. A diet that's much higher in protein, because I think it's L-tyrosine that dopamine needs for its production. And so you need to eat more protein in your diet. You need to avoid sugars and processed foods, all stuff. Obviously, you need to avoid drugs and alcohol, but that's a given, isn't it? There's exercise, there's all sorts of stuff. There's also meditation, cold showers. All of these things will naturally increase dopamine production. And if you can't get any help with that, then there are pills which are normally prescribed to people with Parkinson's or restless legs. There is medication, and if you're not producing dopamine, it's called a dopamine agonist medication. So in other words, it helps your body produce more dopamine naturally. So you can see a doctor about that. So that's just one little avenue just to be aware of and to explore. Because, you know, if you can, as far back as you remember all those feelings of low energy, low mood, low motivation, no get up and go, low sex drive, no sleep, you know, all these things, chances are then you'll have inherited low dopamine production in your brain. So you can do something about that, though. You can do something today about that. There's another area which we need to cover in this. Another reason that drives a lot of addicts, and certainly in my head drove me, it could be linked to the dopamine obviously as well. There's no saying it's any one cause, could be lots of causes all brought together, excuse me. And that is pain. Pain, physical pain, mental pain, emotional pain, spiritual pain. Some people have had terrible things happen in their childhoods, and had terrible childhoods. I had a bad childhood, you know, and for many years I blamed, I mean, there was lots of things about it. We talk about genetics. My mum was an alcoholic. I watched her drink and drink and drink, you know, almost drink herself to death and take drugs. So there's learned behaviour going on there. As a child, that's being reinforced in your brain all the time, as well as all the other stuff going on, the genetics in there. And then on top of that, there was a lot of pain in my childhood. Absent father, abandonment issues, lack of self-esteem, bullying, all these things. There was physical abuse as well in there thrown in. So all these things will have an effect naturally. You know, you can't come out unscathed. If you do, you're really lucky. So there's always those thoughts that creeping into your head. So self-medication becomes an issue in addiction as well, because you don't like feeling or remembering those things that happened to you. You have a lot of issues growing up around particularly your confidence and self-esteem, and you find that alcohol and drugs will help you with that. Then that can be another avenue into addiction and a reason to continue with it, because you're just self-medicating, which is why you can't stop at one. You know, if someone said to me in my real addict days, my heavy drinking and drug use days, we'll just go for a pint, we'll just go for one drink, I would look at them as though they were lunatics, because that just wouldn't be like going, let's get 4 cans of beer in to watch the football. What do you mean 4 cans of beer? I just look at them as though they were mental, because I would know that if I had one, then I would need to keep going until all those uncomfortable feelings and thoughts and lack of self-esteem and everything went out the window and I couldn't remember anymore. So what do you do about all that shit going on? Now, some people have had horrendous abuse in their childhood, which you can't just suddenly forgive and forget and carry on with your life as though nothing's happened. So if you want to remain sober, then you're going to go and have to talk to somebody about that who's a professional, whether it be medical professional, psychological professional, counselling, whatever it is. But you're going to need to address it. You're going to need to move forward from it. No one's saying you're ever going to be able to forget it or anything about that. But you've got to learn to live with it and cope with those feelings and find an alternative coping strategy rather than alcohol or drugs. Because if you don't, then you're never going to get out of addiction. For me, you know, there was nothing so terrible that I couldn't forgive. In the end, it was about understanding my mother's issues because I'd suffered from them myself. So I did forgive her because, God bless her, she tried her hardest to bring up 2 boys with a husband who buggered off and had an affair and never saw him again, no money, and all these other things. You know, she just had to cope and get through. So instead of blaming her and drinking on my anger and resentment all the time, I learned to forgive that because I've been through it myself. I understood because I've done the same things to my family. You know, it's just it just keeps going and going into generations unless you put a stop to it and deal with it. So I did forgive, and I stopped using it as an excuse for my drinking. And I also found with my mood, I've had mental health issues. anxiety issues. It's just part and parcel of the whole thing, whether it be low dopamine, whatever it is. So I've found alternative coping strategies that revolve around prayer and meditation, cold showers and breathing exercises. Exercise itself has been integral, obviously. Clean diet has been integral. And also talking, you know, to other people. Talking to peers who understand, who are addicts and alcoholics, who've been there before. And always talking, if I'm feel these feelings coming on, never ever bottling them up, never isolating, getting out and talking to someone, picking up the phone if I feel I need to. These are all coping strategies rather than turn to, if I had one now, I'd be dead, because I've got no more recovery left in me. I'm tired of it. You know, I'm happy with the way my life is at the moment. I'm happy with the way things are going. But that's the reason, you know, some of the reasons why you might be struggling at the moment. Twofold. There's always a reason behind you going after this stuff, whether it be a genetic or a medical one linked to the dopamine thing I talked about, or whether it be pain, current pain, you know, and physical pain too, as well. You need to address. Until you do address those issues behind your drinking and drug use, you'll never recover. There'll always be a chance that you'll take a drink and a drug again, and again you won't be able to stop. So I hope that's been some use to you. Much love to you all. Carpe diem. Please read the link in the description. Help if you can. Please subscribe. Please like the video. Much love to you all. See you next time. Bye-bye.